Hello friends, this video on anatomy of flowering plants part 12 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Okay, so now let us look at how exactly this opening and closing of stomata take place. As I told you before also that basically the pore is controlled by the movement of the guard cells. Now as the guard cells move, the pore increases or decreases in its size. Now we will see what makes the guard cells change their shape. Now in order to understand this, there are two basic things that you need to remember. Okay, the two general things. One is, as the solute concentration increases in any solution, the water potential decreases. Okay, so here I will write down the two important points. As there is an increase in solute concentration, what happens? Water potential decreases. What does this mean? Let us consider a sugar solution. So you take say 1 spoon of sugar in 1 cup of water and mix it nicely. So that is a solution. So what is your solute here? Sugar. And you have sugar and water. Fine. Now let us suppose that you add 3 more spoons of sugar into the same solution and mix it. So what happens? Your solute concentration is increasing. The concentration of sugar is increasing. So what will happen to the water? Now if you compare it with the previous solution where you had put just 1 spoon of sugar, the water was more, it was more like water, right? But now when you have added 3 more spoons of sugar, the water has become more sticky and it is not that smooth and not that flowing. Correct? So the water potential is gradually decreasing as you are increasing the solute concentration. Now if you add 10 more spoons of sugar into that water, maybe it will become so very thick that it will hardly look like a fluid. It will be like almost like a semi-fluid. Right? So what is changing the water potential? The increase in solute concentration. Right? So this is one concept which you should remember. The second concept that you should remember is that water always moves from higher to lower potential. Right? What does this mean? Now here let us take some other example. Let us suppose you have a cup of hot tea. Correct? Now what happens when you keep that cup of hot tea on the table for say half an hour? What happens? The tea gradually becomes cold. Why so? Because the temperature, heat was flowing, the tea was hot. So heat was there, the temperature was high when compared to the surroundings. Right? Now heat started flowing from an environment with higher temperature towards an environment at lower temperature. So heat started flowing from that cup of tea to the surroundings up to a point when both the temperatures became equal. That is why after half an hour when you see, it is almost the temperature of that tea is almost the same as the temperature of the surroundings. So it is no more hot. Right? So a similar concept applies to water as well. Water will also always try to move from an environment with higher water potential to an environment with lower water potential. So, and it is true for most of the objects. They always tend to move from a region of higher potential towards a region of lower potential. Now, keeping these two concepts in mind, it will become very easy to understand the concept of opening and closing of stomata. Now, what happens is, in presence of sunlight, when there is a lot of sunlight during the daytime, the concentration of potassium ions increases in the guard cells. Now, here in this picture, you can see that I have shown few black dots. So those black dots represent nothing but the potassium ions. Correct? So these black dots represent potassium ions which are present inside the guard cells. What happens is, in presence of sunlight, the concentration of this potassium ions will increase. So basically what is increasing? The solute concentration is increasing because water is there everywhere, correct? Now when the solute concentration increases or when the potassium ion concentration increases, the water potential decreases. So where is the water potential decreasing? The water potential is decreasing inside the guard cells. Right? So now in this situation, the water potential inside the guard cell is less than the water potential in all other cells. For example, the subsidiary cells or the other epidermal cells. So everywhere else the water potential is more. So what will happen? Water will move from higher potential to lower potential. That means water will flow from all other cells into the guard cells. Correct? So the guard cells will start swelling up because more and more water will start coming inside the guard cells. Clear? Now remember one thing. I told you that there is one characteristic of guard cells, that the inner walls, these two walls, inner walls, they are very thick and the outer walls are very thin. Now what happens when too much water starts entering into the guard cells? The outer walls are not that rigid because they are thin. So they keep on expanding, but the inner walls are very rigid. So as a result, the inner wall starts bending. So as a result, the entire guard cell starts bending, something like this. So if you see, this is the contraction part in absence of sunlight. Now in presence of sunlight, here you can see the concentration of ion increasing and the cells are bending, correct? And the reverse process happens in absence of sunlight. So looking at this picture, are you able to understand? In sunlight, potassium ions are increasing, cells are swelling up, therefore the pore increases. Whereas when there is no sunlight, concentration of potassium ions decreases, therefore the water potential increases, so water starts moving out of the guard cells and the guard cells starts contracting, therefore the pore decreases. Right? Now since this is a very important concept, so we will write it once again. Now first we will talk about the opening of the pore. So in the opening of the pore, the first thing that happens is potassium ion concentration increases. As a result of this, water potential in guard cells decreases. So what happens? Water starts moving. Water moves from higher potential to lower potential. So water starts moving from other cells to the guard cells. As a result of this, what happens? The guard cells swell up. Now what happens due to the swelling up of the guard cells? Since the inner walls of the guard cells are rigid, therefore they bend. So the wall starts bending due to the swelling up, and as a result of this bending of the guard cells, the pore increases or opens up. And exactly the reverse process happens when the concentration of the potassium ion decreases. So this is how the opening and the closing of the stomata take place. So when there is no light, the potassium ion decreases. So when the concentration of potassium ion decreases, water potential in the guard cell will increase. So the water will start moving from guard cell to the other cell. So the guard cells will shrink up. When the guard cells shrink up, they will contract and therefore the pore will decrease. Right? Okay. So I hope this is clear what causes the opening and closing of stomata. Now, to be honest, It is not only one factor which is responsible for opening and closing of stomata. Like here I explained it on the basis of the concentration of potassium ions, which again I said is dependent on sunlight. But it is not always that stomata always opens in presence of sunlight. In most of the plants it opens in presence of sunlight, but there are plants where the stomata opens at night as well. So we can say that this presence of sunlight and the concentration of potassium ion is not the only factor which can govern the opening and closing of stomata. There are other factors as well. So let us look at the various factors that can influence the stomatal movement. Now some of the important factors are light. Light, as I said just now, I don't need to explain it once again, because as I said, in presence of light, potassium ion concentration in the guard cells increases, and that way it governs the opening and closing of stomata. Next is temperature. Now when I say temperature, how is temperature related to the opening and closing of stomata? So let us have a look at that. Now temperature is directly proportional to the size of stomatal pore. That means as the temperature increases, the pore also increases in size. That means the pores open. As the temperature decreases, the pore also decreases in size, or the pore gets closed. That is the reason that in some plants the stomata opens even in darkness if the temperature is very, very high. Because let us suppose there is no light. So one factor is ruled out. So this factor is not there. Light is not there. So in that case, if light is not there, stomata should be closed. But let us suppose if the temperature is very high. Now if the temperature is high, the stomatal pore should also be increased. So the stomata should open. So the stomata can open in some plants if the temperature is very high. So in that case, it can even open in darkness. The third factor is carbon dioxide. So the third factor is carbon dioxide. And the concentration of carbon dioxide also affects the size of the stomatal pore. So here the carbon dioxide concentration is inversely proportional to the size of the stomatal pore. So this is inversely proportional to the size of the pore. That means as the concentration of carbon dioxide increases, the size of the stomatal pore decreases. That is, as carbon dioxide concentration increases, the stomatal pore gets closed. And as the concentration of carbon dioxide decreases, the stomatal pore opens up. Now when I talk about concentration of carbon dioxide, I am talking about the internal carbon dioxide concentration only, not the external CO2 concentration. For example, you might say that okay, in the atmosphere the concentration of CO2 is increasing, but that will not affect the stomatal movement. Here concentration means the concentration of CO2 inside the leaf. So only the internal carbon dioxide concentration will have an impact. The next is oxygen. So even oxygen, the presence of oxygen is also essential for stomatal opening. Without that, it just cannot do. Next is water availability. Now, there might be certain areas or there might be certain seasons where there is less water available to the plant, or there is high transpiration rate. In that case also the stomata closes up, because as I said, one of the important challenges in the life of every living organism, including plant, is dehydration. So water should not be lost to a large extent. So whenever the rate of transpiration is very high due to the climatic factors or due in certain areas, or let us suppose if less water is available to the plant, there is not much water in the soil. So if there is scarcity of water within the plant, the stomata doesn't open up, it remains closed, because opening up of stomata will actually cause some loss of water. So in order to compensate for the rate of transpiration, the stomata gets closed to save some water. And last, One is nothing but potassium. As I said just now, the concentration of the potassium ions basically governs the opening and closing of stomata. Now you can understand, since the opening and closing of stomata is dependent on so many factors like light, temperature, carbon dioxide, oxygen, water availability and potassium. Therefore, even though in most of the plants, the stomata opens during the daytime, but that is not a necessity. They can even open at night time if the temperature is very high or if the carbon dioxide concentration is very less, right? Or the rate of transpiration is very low. So in any of these cases, the stomata can open even at night. Therefore, we see that in some plants, the stomata actually opens at night, and in some plants, the stomata opens only for few hours in the evening. So that is because there are many factors which are responsible for the stomatal movement. So with this, I think I have covered the discussion on opening and closing of stomata. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.